Tonight, we will tell you a story about a challenge as ancient as humanity itself, the relentless struggle against the cold. You will learn of a time when there was no electricity, no central heating, and even glass was a luxury. This is a story of human ingenuity, born from necessity, revealing how our ancestors transformed the very materials of their world into a shield against the biting chill. You will discover how they built homes with thick layers of mud and clay, how straw and rushes served as crucial insulation, and how animal furs and wool became essential parts of their walls and coverings. We will explore the vital role of heavy fabric hangings in creating pockets of warmth within large rooms and the meticulous layering of floors to block the ground's chill. You will learn the simple yet ingenious ways medieval people blocked cold air from entering through openings, how the central hearth provided warmth and contributed to a sealed environment, and why sharing living spaces with family and even livestock was a common and crucial practice for staying warm. This is a tale of resilience, resourcefulness, and the timeless human need for comfort in a harsh world. Oh, and if you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment with suggestions for new topics. Sleep stories are released here every day. All right, find a comfortable spot, let your mind drift, and prepare to journey back to a time when warmth was a hard-won victory. In the heart of the Middle Ages, life was a constant negotiation with the elements, and perhaps no element was as persistent, as pervasive, and as dangerous as the cold. Tonight, I will invite you to journey back to a time long past, a world without the silent hum of central heating, without the gentle warmth emanating from insulated walls or sealed windows. We will travel to the Middle Ages, a period spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th century, 1,000 years when life was often harsh, and the elements, particularly the cold, were a constant, formidable adversary. Imagine a world where the chill of winter was not merely an inconvenience, but a genuine threat, seeping into every home, every bone, and demanding relentless vigilance. You will learn how people, facing temperatures that could plunge far below freezing, crafted ingenious ways to keep their living spaces tolerable. We will explore the surprising materials they used, often found directly from the land around them, and the clever techniques they developed to combat the pervasive cold. You will discover how simple earth and clay became foundational barriers, how humble straw and reeds transformed into vital thermal layers, and how the very animals they kept, both alive and in their byproducts, contributed profoundly to their survival and comfort. We will delve into the often overlooked details of how floors were insulated, how precious heat was conserved from open fires, and how even the shared breath of a community became a source of warmth. This is a story not just about building materials, but about human resilience, adaptability, and the fundamental ancient drive to create a sanctuary, however modest, against the biting chill of the world. So, allow your mind to settle, and let us begin our quiet exploration of medieval warmth, starting with the very nature of the cold they faced. In the medieval period, homes, whether grand castles or humble peasant dwellings, were fundamentally different from the structures we inhabit today. Most were built with materials readily available: wood, stone, and earth. While sturdy, these materials in their raw forms offered little inherent insulation against the relentless cold. Stone walls, though strong, conducted heat away rapidly, becoming very cold. Wooden structures, often with gaps and imperfect joinery, were prone to drafts that penetrated every crevice. Even the earth floors, while solid, radiated a bone-chilling cold upwards, making every step a reminder of the outside temperature. The concept of a tightly sealed, energy-efficient building was simply unknown. Windows, if present at all, were often just unglazed openings, or at best, covered with oiled parchment or thin animal bladders, which kept out some wind and rain, but allowed much of the heat to escape and the cold to penetrate. Doors were heavy and often ill-fitting, creating more pathways for drafts. The very design of many medieval buildings, with their large open halls, was not conducive to retaining warmth. Heat, even from a roaring fire, would quickly dissipate into the vast unpartitioned spaces, leaving large areas of a home perpetually frigid. This pervasive cold was not a seasonal visitor. It was an ever-present resident. Inside a medieval home, the air temperature could often be only a few degrees warmer than the outside, especially during the long, dark winter nights. Water would freeze indoors. Breath would mist in the air. The act of simply existing indoors during the colder months required a constant conscious effort to stay warm. It dictated daily routines, influenced diet, and shaped the very social fabric of communities. People huddled together not just for companionship, but for shared body heat. They dressed in layers, even indoors, and sought out the meager warmth of a central hearth. The challenge was profound. How does one create a haven of warmth when every material seems to conspire against it? How do you keep the inside from becoming an extension of the freezing outdoors when the very structure of your home is porous? This was the silent daily battle faced by everyone, from the lowliest serf to the mightiest lord. It wasn't about luxury. It was about survival, about preventing frostbite, about maintaining health, and about simply enduring the long, dark nights. The fundamental human need for warmth, for shelter from the elements, drove an astonishing array of solutions, born not of scientific understanding, but of generations of practical experience and observation. They learned from the land, from the animals, and from the simple physics of trapped air and thermal mass, even if they never articulated it in those terms. Their methods were often labor-intensive, requiring constant maintenance and renewal, but they were effective in their own way, creating pockets of relative comfort in an otherwise unforgiving environment. The struggle against the cold was a testament to ingenuity. It forced people to look at every available resource differently, transforming common materials into essential tools for survival. They learned to layer, to fill, to block, and to adapt. Their homes, in essence, became living, breathing entities, constantly adjusted and readjusted to meet the changing demands of the climate. They understood instinctively that heat was precious, and its escape was to be prevented at all costs. This ancient wisdom, passed down through generations, formed a complex tapestry of techniques, each contributing to the overarching goal of keeping the chill at bay. It was a constant dance with the elements, a testament to human resilience in the face of nature's raw power. And it is this quiet, persistent struggle that we will now explore, one layer of warmth at a time. The first step in this journey of medieval insulation was understanding how to use the very earth beneath their feet and the mud and clay that could be molded from it to create a foundational barrier against the unrelenting cold. These materials, seemingly simple, formed the initial thick blocks that began to capture and hold warmth, and crucially, to block the insidious drafts that were the bane of every cold medieval household. Having laid the fundamental groundwork of their homes, medieval builders turned to the most abundant and perhaps most intuitive resources available, the very earth beneath their feet. In an age without sophisticated insulation materials, mud, clay, and turf became the primary defenses against the relentless chill of winter and the heat of summer. These humble substances, shaped by human hands, provided the essential thermal mass and draft-blocking properties that were critical for survival. Consider first the widespread use of mud and clay, often combined in a technique known as wattle and daub. This method, simple yet remarkably effective, formed the very fabric of countless homes across Europe. To begin, a framework of slender branches or saplings, often hazel or willow, would be interwoven between upright timber posts. This created a flexible, strong lattice, much like a basket weave, known as the wattle. Once this skeletal structure was in place, the true work of insulation began. The daub was prepared, a carefully balanced mixture of clay, sand, straw, and often animal dung. The clay provided the crucial binding agent, holding everything together. Sand was added to prevent excessive shrinkage and cracking as the mixture dried, lending strength to the final wall. Straw, chopped into short lengths, acted as a natural reinforcement, much like rebar in modern concrete, preventing the daub from crumbling and adding a critical layer of trapped air for insulation. The addition of animal dung, while perhaps unappealing to modern sensibilities, served multiple purposes. Its fibers added to the binding strength, and its ammonia content helped deter pests, and even acted as a mild preservative. This earthy concoction, often mixed by foot or with simple tools, would then be pressed firmly onto both sides of the wattle framework. Builders would apply it in layers, allowing each application to partially dry before adding the next, gradually building up walls that could be several inches thick. The result was a surprisingly robust monolithic wall that possessed excellent thermal properties. These thick, dense walls absorbed the sun's heat during the day, slowly releasing it into the interior during the cooler evening hours. Conversely, in winter, they resisted the penetration of cold, keeping the warmth generated by the hearth contained within. The very density of the daub, combined with the straw's fibrous network, proved an exceptional barrier against the incessant drafts that would otherwise penetrate thinner constructions. Beyond the walls, mud and clay found other uses. They were often packed down to create solid, insulating floors and were, of course, the primary material for constructing the hearths themselves, where fires burned and provided the central source of warmth. The cool, earthy scent of these walls, once fully dried, would have been a constant, reassuring presence, a reminder of the protection they offered. Then there was turf, or sod, a building material particularly favored in regions where timber was scarce, or where the climate demanded an even more profound level of natural insulation. From the windswept plains of Scandinavia to the rugged coasts of Ireland and Scotland, turf houses stood as resilient testaments to human ingenuity. Turf was harvested directly from the earth, cut into blocks much like bricks, but composed of dense soil interwoven with a thick mat of grass roots. These root systems were the key to turf's insulating power. They created countless tiny air pockets within each block, and trapped air is one of nature's most effective insulators. When these turf blocks were stacked to form walls, they created a deep, substantial barrier against the elements. Often, the blocks would be laid with the grass side facing outwards, encouraging continued growth, which further bound the wall together and added another layer of living, green insulation. On roofs, turf was even more profoundly effective. Layered over simple timber frames, often several feet thick, these living roofs became impenetrable blankets. They absorbed rainfall, slowly releasing it, and maintained a remarkably stable temperature beneath. The sheer mass of a turf roof, combined with the trapped air within its structure, meant that the internal temperature of the dwelling would fluctuate very little, regardless of the harsh conditions outside. Imagine the quiet, deep warmth within such a home, where the sounds of the gale outside were muffled by feet of living earth, and the air inside remained still and temperate. These walls and roofs, embodying the very essence of the landscape, provided not just shelter, but a profound embrace from the earth itself, a continuous, silent battle against the cold that defined so much of medieval life. The damp earth, slowly drying, then freezing, then thawing, was a constant cycle, yet the homes built from it offered a stability that modern structures, for all their advancements, sometimes fail to replicate. The earth and clay of the walls provided a solid initial barrier against the biting winds, but for true warmth, medieval builders then turned to the abundance of nature's lighter, fibrous gifts. Among the most versatile and vital materials were straw, reeds, and rushes, each playing a crucial role in transforming a mere shelter into a more habitable space. These seemingly simple plant materials possessed a remarkable insulating property. Their natural structure, often hollow or porous, allowed them to trap pockets of air. Trapped air is a poor conductor of heat, meaning it slows the transfer of warmth from inside a home to the cold outside, or conversely, prevents the chill from penetrating inward. This fundamental principle of insulation, though perhaps not understood in scientific terms by the people of the Middle Ages, was intuitively applied with great success. Perhaps the most visible and widespread application of these natural fibers was in roofing, specifically in the art of thatching. A thatched roof was not merely a covering. It was a thick organic blanket designed to shed water and, crucially, to hold warmth. Layers upon layers of straw, often from wheat or rye, or bundles of carefully harvested reeds, particularly common in marshy areas, were meticulously laid onto the roof timbers. Each layer overlapped the last, creating a substantial depth, often several feet thick at the eaves. The dry, tightly packed stalks, with their myriad tiny air pockets, formed an incredibly effective thermal barrier. Imagine the quiet hush under such a roof, the way it absorbed the sounds of the outside world, creating a cocoon of relative warmth. The gentle rustle of the dry reeds in a light breeze might have been the only sound heard from above, a constant reminder of the natural materials protecting the inhabitants. A well-maintained thatched roof could last for decades, providing superior insulation compared to other contemporary roofing materials like wooden shingles, though it did carry the inherent risk of fire. Beyond the roof, these natural fibers were indispensable in the construction of the walls themselves, particularly in the widespread technique known as wattle and daub. This method, often used for the upper stories of timber-framed houses or for entire smaller dwellings, relied on a woven framework of branches and stakes, the wattle, which was then filled with a mixture, the daub. And it was in this daub that straw and sometimes reeds found their essential purpose. The daub itself was typically a blend of clay, soil, sand, and animal dung, but without a fibrous binder, it could crack and crumble as it dried. The addition of chopped straw or reeds served as a natural reinforcement, much like rebar in modern concrete, giving the daub greater tensile strength and preventing shrinkage. More importantly for insulation, the straw also created thousands of tiny air pockets within the daub mixture. As the wet daub was pressed firmly into the wattle framework, enveloping the straw, it dried into a surprisingly solid and thermally efficient wall. The rough, organic texture of these walls, often left exposed or simply whitewashed, spoke of their humble yet effective composition. They offered a noticeable improvement in warmth compared to uninsulated stone or simple timber constructions, significantly reducing the chilling effect of drafts and external cold. The floor, too, was a primary concern for warmth, as the ground beneath a medieval home was a constant source of penetrating cold and dampness. While some wealthier homes might have had stone flags, the vast majority had simple earthen floors. To combat the cold rising from the earth, people turned to the simplest and most readily available solution, covering the floor with thick layers of rushes and straw. These materials were gathered from fields and wetlands and spread generously across the entire floor area, often several inches deep. The soft, springy layer of dried vegetation served multiple purposes. Firstly, and most critically for warmth, it created an insulating barrier, trapping air between the strands and preventing the direct transfer of cold from the ground to the living space. Secondly, it absorbed moisture, helping to keep the floor dry and less prone to mildew. Thirdly, it provided a much softer and more comfortable surface underfoot than bare earth or hard stone. Imagine the simple luxury of stepping onto a yielding, fragrant layer of dried rushes after a long day in the cold. This layer, though needing frequent replacement due to wear and inevitable soiling, was a constant, tangible source of warmth and comfort. Sometimes, herbs were mixed in with the rushes, providing a faint, pleasant aroma, adding another subtle layer of sensory comfort to the otherwise stark interior. These applications of straw, reeds, and rushes demonstrate a profound understanding of passive insulation, born not of scientific theory, but of generations of practical experience and necessity. From the protective cap of the roof to the very ground beneath their feet, medieval people ingeniously harnessed the insulating power of trapped air within these abundant natural fibers. They were not just building materials. They were woven into the very fabric of daily life, a constant, often overlooked defense against the relentless chill of the medieval winter. Every stalk, every blade contributed to a collective effort to retain precious warmth, turning a cold, damp shelter into a home where life could not only endure, but also, in its own way, flourish amidst the challenges of the natural world. The ingenuity lay in the simplicity and the sheer volume of their application, creating a layered defense that was both effective and sustainable, relying entirely on what the immediate environment offered. As resourceful as the medieval people were with the abundant gifts of the earth, meticulously using straw, reeds, and rushes to fill their walls, thatch their roofs, and cover their floors, they turned with equal ingenuity and perhaps even greater reliance to the animal kingdom. From its diverse bounty, they found another profound and indispensable layer of defense against the relentless biting cold that permeated every aspect of life. The furs and hides of animals, whether gathered from domesticated livestock or hunted from the wild, became invaluable, versatile tools in this constant, arduous struggle for warmth, comfort, and sheer survival during the long, dark months. Imagine the tangible, immediate warmth offered by the thick, luxuriant pelts of sheep, the robust, enduring hides of cattle, or the even denser, often shaggier furs procured from wild creatures such as deer, foxes, bears, and wolves. The specific type and quality of these animal skins would, of course, depend heavily on the region's fauna, the family's social standing, and their economic means. These precious resources were far more than mere materials for clothing. They were integral, living components of the home's passive insulation system. Once carefully cured and painstakingly treated to prevent decay and maintain their pliability, these animal skins were then strategically hung against the inner surfaces of the cold stone or rough-hewn timber walls. They served as a remarkably effective, tangible barrier, staunchly resisting the chilling drafts that, despite all efforts, seemed to find their way through every tiny crack, every ill-fitting joint, and every porous surface. Each fur, with its inherent natural density and the microscopic air pockets trapped within its multitude of fibers, created a static, insulating layer, a natural, highly efficient pocket of warmth that actively deterred the outward flow of precious heat. This method was particularly vital in homes constructed primarily of stone, which possessed an unfortunate tendency to quickly absorb and then relentlessly radiate the frigid outdoor temperatures directly into the living space. The heavy drapes of hides helped to break this direct thermal bridge, forming an essential, pliable layer that trapped the valuable warmth generated by the central hearth within the confined space of the room. The sensory experience of running a hand over such a wall hanging, feeling its soft, yielding texture against the hard, unyielding stone, offered a deep, primal sense of comfort and security. Beyond their prominent use as protective wall hangings, animal hides found their indispensable place on the floors, adding another crucial layer of warmth from below. Simpler, often coarser hides, or even large, rugged ones that could withstand constant foot traffic, were methodically laid down as primitive yet highly effective rugs. These offered a profoundly welcome warmth beneath bare feet, especially in dwellings with cold earth, packed clay, or unforgiving stone floors, preventing the immediate and uncomfortable transfer of cold. Beyond the direct application of furs and hides for personal warmth, or as simple floor coverings that captured a measure of heat, the medieval mind conceived of another ingenious way to combat the relentless cold within their homes: the strategic use of woven fabrics. These were not merely for decoration, though they certainly added a much-needed splash of color and artistry to often austere interiors. Their primary purpose, particularly in the grand high-ceilinged halls of castles, manors, and even more modest timber-framed houses was profoundly practical. To create pockets of warmth within vast, drafty spaces, and to mitigate the chilling effect of stone or poorly insulated timber walls. Imagine, if you will, standing in a medieval great hall. The walls might be of thick stone, impressive and structurally sound, yet stone is a poor insulator. It readily absorbs the warmth generated by a central hearth and radiates cold back into the room. Timber walls, while perhaps slightly better, still allowed drafts to penetrate through gaps and cracks, especially as the wood aged and shifted. The sheer volume of air in these large rooms meant that any heat produced would quickly dissipate, rising to the high ceilings and escaping through roof gaps or unglazed windows. The challenge was immense: how to make such a space not just tolerable, but genuinely habitable and comfortable during the long, dark, and often bitter winters. The answer lay in the simple yet effective principle of air trapping and draft exclusion. Heavy fabric hangings, often referred to as tapestries, though many were simpler textile panels, were suspended from wooden battens or iron rings fixed to the walls. These hangings typically did not press directly against the wall. Instead, they hung a few inches away, creating a crucial air gap. This trapped layer of still air acted as an insulating barrier, significantly reducing the transfer of cold from the stone or timber wall into the living space. Air, when it is stationary, is an excellent insulator, far more effective than the solid materials of the wall itself. Furthermore, these substantial swathes of fabric acted as physical barriers against the incessant drafts that would otherwise snake their way through every crevice and opening. They blocked the cold air from rushing in and the precious warm air from escaping. The heavier the fabric, the more effective it was at this task. Wool, with its dense fibers and natural ability to trap air within its weave, was the material of choice for these practical hangings. It was abundant, durable, and possessed inherent insulating properties. Even simpler, coarser weaves of wool or thick linen could provide a surprising degree of protection against the biting chill. The very act of hanging these fabrics transformed the interior environment in multiple ways. Visually, they softened the harsh lines of stone or rough timber, creating a more intimate and enclosed feeling within the vastness of halls. The rich colors and intricate patterns, when present, added a sense of beauty and luxury, but their functional benefit was paramount. Acoustically, they absorbed sound, dampening the echoes that would otherwise reverberate through a large, unadorned space. This made conversations easier to hear, muffled the clatter of daily life, and contributed to a quieter, more peaceful atmosphere conducive to rest and contemplation. Beyond the immediate warmth and sound dampening, these hangings also helped to manage the pervasive dampness that often plagued medieval stone buildings. Stone walls, especially in colder climates, could become incredibly cold and even condense moisture from the air. The fabric hangings, while not eliminating dampness, could absorb some surface moisture and, more importantly, create a buffer zone that prevented direct contact with the cold, clammy stone. This made the interior feel drier and less oppressive, adding another layer of comfort to the medieval dwelling. The preparation and maintenance of these hangings were a significant undertaking. The wool had to be spun, dyed, and woven into large, heavy panels. For the wealthier households, This might involve skilled artisans creating elaborate tapestries depicting historical events, mythical scenes, or heraldic symbols. These were incredibly valuable, sometimes more so than the furniture, and would be moved with the household from one residence to another. For more common homes, the hangings would be simpler, perhaps plain dyed wool or even felted panels, but their function remained the same. Hanging them securely required strong wooden battens, sometimes running the entire length of a wall, or sturdy iron hooks from which rings sewn onto the fabric could be suspended. The weight of these hangings was considerable, demanding robust fixtures. Periodically, these hangings would need to be taken down for cleaning, though this was a laborious task, often involving beating the dust out of them outdoors. This cycle of use, removal, and rehanging was a regular part of medieval domestic life, underscoring their vital role in creating a comfortable living space. The concept of creating an inner, insulated skin within a larger structure was fundamental to medieval comfort. These hangings effectively reduced the perceived volume of a room, allowing the available heat from the hearth to concentrate in a smaller, more manageable space. They created a microclimate within the larger, often chilly building envelope. In some cases, specific areas within a larger hall might be further enclosed with hangings to create temporary, more private, and warmer rooms within rooms, such as bedchambers or quiet study areas. This layering of fabric provided a flexible and adaptable solution to the challenge of heating large open spaces without the benefit of modern heating systems or advanced insulation materials. Thus, the seemingly simple act of hanging fabric on a wall was, in fact, a sophisticated and multifunctional approach to insulation. It demonstrated a deep understanding of thermal principles. Even if the scientific terminology was not yet developed, it was a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of medieval people who used the materials readily available to them, primarily wool from their flocks, to transform cold, echoing spaces into areas that offered a measure of warmth, quiet, and comfort. These woven barriers were an indispensable component of the medieval home's defense against the unrelenting chill, working in concert with other natural materials to create a surprisingly effective, if never perfectly warm, sanctuary from the harsh elements outside. Their presence was a constant reminder of the continuous struggle against the cold and the creative solutions forged in an era without modern conveniences. Having considered how walls and openings were addressed, you might imagine the cold still found its way inside through the very ground beneath your feet. Indeed, medieval homes, particularly those of the common folk, often had floors of compacted earth, sometimes covered with flagstones or rough timber. These materials, while sturdy and readily available, were inherently poor insulators, and the relentless chill of the damp earth would seep upwards, permeating the very air of the room and making every step a cold reminder of the stark world outside. To combat this pervasive, bone-chilling cold that rose from below, a remarkably simple yet profoundly effective practice was employed: the deliberate layering of various organic materials, transforming the hard, cold floor into a soft, insulating carpet that stretched across the entire living space. The most common and universally accessible material used for this essential purpose was rushes. These tall, slender, reedy plants abundant in marshy areas, along riverbanks, and in damp meadows, were gathered in immense quantities during the warmer months, often by the family members themselves. Once harvested, they would be dried, a crucial step to prevent mildew and ensure longevity. Imagine, if you will, the sheer volume of rushes needed to cover even a modest room, bundles upon bundles carried back to the home. Once dried, they would be spread across the floor in thick, deep layers, often several inches deep, creating a tangible barrier between the inhabitants and the cold ground. You would feel the slight springiness beneath your feet as you walked, hearing the soft, distinctive rustling sound with every movement. This dense layer of rushes served multiple vital functions. Its primary role was to trap air within its intricate fibrous structure, creating a crucial thermal barrier that significantly slowed the transfer of cold from the earth below. It also possessed a natural ability to absorb some of the omnipresent dampness that would otherwise condense on a bare, uninsulated floor, making the entire living space feel noticeably drier and, by extension, considerably more comfortable. The initial scent of these freshly laid rushes was typically earthy and green, a subtle aroma that brought a faint echo of the natural world indoors, though this fragrance would inevitably gradually mingle with the more pronounced smells of daily life, including the ever-present smoke from the hearth and the lingering odors of cooking and human activity. To enhance both the aroma and the general pleasantness of these organic floor coverings, people often undertook the additional step of mixing in various fragrant herbs among the rushes. Popular choices included lavender, known for its calming properties and sweet perfume, invigorating mint, soothing chamomile, and delicate sweet woodruff, all harvested and dried alongside the rushes. Their dried leaves and flowers, scattered generously, would release their subtle perfumes as they were trodden upon, creating a constantly shifting, gentle fragrance in the air. This practice was not merely for aesthetic pleasure, though that was certainly a welcome benefit. It served a deeply practical purpose, helping to mask the less desirable odors that, despite best efforts, inevitably accumulated in a medieval home. Furthermore, certain herbs were believed to possess properties that acted as a deterrent to various pests, providing a small measure of protection against fleas, lice, and other unwelcome creatures that might otherwise take up residence in the organic floor layers. The combination of the persistent soft rustling of the rushes underfoot and the faint, often intermittent, sweet fragrance of the herbs would have created a truly unique sensory experience within these often dark, often smoky, and always challenging medieval interiors. For those seeking an even greater degree of warmth and insulation, particularly in the depths of winter, or in homes where rushes were less readily available, straw was also extensively employed. Straw, being the dry stalks of cereal plants like wheat or barley, possessed a hollow structure and a more substantial volume than rushes, offering superior insulating properties. Piled high, often even deeper than the rush layers, it created an even more effective thermal barrier, providing a discernible and welcome difference in the floor's temperature. You could feel the soft, yielding cushion of it beneath your feet, a gentle spring that absorbed the shock of movement. However, The use of straw came with its own distinct set of challenges and considerations. It was, while the meticulously layered floors provided a crucial defense against the cold rising from the earth, the very design of medieval homes presented another profound challenge: the openings in their walls. Imagine, if you will, a world where the concept of clear, thin sheets of glass allowing light to flood a room while keeping the elements at bay was almost entirely unknown. Glass was not merely expensive, it was a miraculous rarity, reserved for the most sacred spaces of cathedrals, where stained glass windows transformed light into divine art, or for the very grandest chambers of kings and emperors, where small, thick panes might be set into lead frames. For the vast majority of people, from the humble peasant to the prosperous merchant, a window was not a transparent barrier, but simply a carefully considered aperture in the thick stone or wattle and daub wall. These openings, designed to admit a precious sliver of light or allow a necessary breath of air, were also gateways for the ceaseless biting wind and the creeping, chilling frost. They represented a fundamental vulnerability, a constant point of entry for the relentless cold that sought to invade every corner of the dwelling, a tangible enemy that could steal warmth silently away, making comfort an elusive luxury. To combat this pervasive threat, medieval communities developed a range of ingenious, though often remarkably simple, solutions. The most ubiquitous and effective defense against the raw power of the elements was the sturdy wooden shutter. These were not the delicate decorative shutters we might see on modern homes. Rather, they were thick, heavy planks of timber, sometimes reinforced with iron, designed to be firmly latched or barred from the inside. When the sun began to set, or when the weather turned foul, as it so often did in the unpredictable climate of the Middle Ages, these shutters would be swung shut with a definitive, resonant thud, effectively sealing the opening. They provided an immediate and robust block against the driving rain, the howling wind, and the insidious cold, their solid presence offering a palpable sense of security against the vast, dark unknown beyond the walls. The sound of these heavy wooden barriers being drawn closed each evening would have been a comforting, almost ritualistic signal, marking the sealing of the domestic space against the chill of the outside world, a small yet significant victory in the nightly battle for warmth, securing the sanctuary within and allowing for a moment of peace. Yet, while wooden shutters offered unparalleled protection, their drawback was profound. They plunged the interior into near total darkness. For those who desired even a modicum of natural light without compromising the hard-won warmth, other materials were carefully employed. You might find window openings covered with sheets of oiled parchment or prepared linen. These materials, often derived from animal hides or tightly woven plant fibers, would be stretched taut across a simple wooden frame, creating a translucent membrane. They allowed a diffused, milky light to filter into the room, a soft, ghostly illumination that softened the often harsh interiors and made daily tasks a little easier to perform, a subtle invitation of the outside world without its bite. Crucially, while they lacked the clarity of modern glass, these prepared surfaces provided a vital barrier against the wind, their tightly sealed nature preventing direct drafts from penetrating the living space. Similarly, in some regions, flattened animal bladders or Thin, carefully prepared slices of horn were used, offering a slightly more durable, if equally opaque, solution. These materials, though simple, were a testament to the resourcefulness of people making the most of what was available, balancing the essential need for light with the absolute imperative of warmth, a clever adaptation to a challenging, often unforgiving environment. Beyond these primary window coverings, a further crucial layer of insulation was often added from within the home. Heavy fabric hangings, typically made of thick, densely woven wool, or, for wealthier households, elaborate tapestries, were draped over window openings from the interior. These were not merely decorative embellishments, though they certainly added color, texture, and a sense of richness to the otherwise stark interiors. Their primary function was profoundly practical. The dense weave of the fabric would trap a layer of still air between itself and the shutter or parchment, creating an additional, highly effective insulating pocket. When drawn, these substantial curtains would effectively seal off the opening, preventing any lingering currents of cold air from permeating the room and helping to retain the precious heat generated within. You can almost feel the weight of such a fabric, the subtle shift in temperature as it was pulled across the opening, making the immediate space feel perceptibly warmer and more contained, a silent, comforting barrier against the unrelenting cold seeping in from outside. It was a constant, diligent effort to ensure every possible point of warmth loss was addressed, a continuous act of domestic engineering, vital for survival. Doors, too, represented significant points of vulnerability in the thermal envelope of a medieval dwelling. A typical medieval door was a substantial affair, crafted from heavy, solid timber, often reinforced with stout iron straps or studs for durability and security. But even the thickest, most well-constructed wooden door could not entirely prevent the relentless creep of cold air from seeping through the inevitable cracks around its frame or underneath its base. This cold, often moving silently, could quickly negate the efforts made elsewhere, chilling the very air in a room. To combat these insidious drafts, various pragmatic methods were employed. Any discernible gaps were often meticulously stuffed with whatever was readily available and pliable, bundles of straw, handfuls of dried moss, or scraps of discarded cloth. This temporary, yet constantly necessary sealing was a familiar chore, a small repetitive task performed daily or as needed to maintain the integrity of the precious warmth within the home, a perpetual battle against the subtle invasion of chill air, a testament to daily vigilance. Furthermore, mirroring the treatment of windows, heavy fabric hangings, often referred to as portières, were frequently hung over interior doorways or even the main entrance itself, creating a series of thermal barriers. These thick curtains, often reaching from ceiling to floor, acted as a kind of rudimentary airlock. When someone entered or exited a room, the portière would momentarily contain the warm air, preventing its rapid escape and minimizing the immediate influx of cold air from the colder adjacent space or the outside. Imagine the sensation of stepping through such a heavy, dense curtain, feeling the almost immediate change in temperature, the slight resistance of the fabric as you passed from one zone of relative warmth to another. It was a simple yet highly effective strategic application of textiles, transforming an otherwise open doorway into a more controlled transition point, a quiet guardian of the internal heat, a testament to the practical ingenuity of the age. Even the very architectural design of medieval buildings often incorporated these considerations. Entrances might be deeply recessed, or feature a small unheated antechamber or vestibule, providing an additional buffer zone before one entered the main, heated living space. This architectural foresight was not driven by aesthetic preference alone, but by the profound pragmatic necessity of keeping hard-won warmth inside and the biting cold firmly outside. Every crack, every seam, every opening, no matter how small, was a potential breach in the painstakingly constructed thermal defenses. Medieval people, through centuries of trial and error, learned to identify and seal these vulnerabilities with remarkable diligence and ingenuity, understanding that even the smallest draft could, over time, leach away the battle against the biting cold, fought at every crevice and opening, found its heart, its very soul, in the central hearth. This was not merely a place to cook, it was the lifeblood of the medieval home, the primary source of warmth, and in ways you might not immediately expect, an integral part of its insulation strategy. Imagine stepping into a medieval dwelling, the air inside noticeably warmer than the frigid outside, and the flickering light of the fire casting long, dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls. The smell of wood smoke, thick and pervasive, would instantly greet you, a scent inextricably linked to survival and comfort in those times. The hearth, typically an open fire pit in the center of the main room, or sometimes a simple stone-lined box against a wall, was kept burning almost constantly, especially during the long, dark winter months. Fuel, whether it was logs gathered from the nearby forest, branches painstakingly collected, or dense peat cut in laborious blocks from bogs, was a precious commodity. Its careful management ensured a steady, enduring supply of heat throughout the long, unforgiving nights and perpetually dim days of winter. The family would gather around it, their bodies absorbing the radiant warmth, the very air around the flames providing a sanctuary from the pervasive chill that clung to the outer walls. This direct heat was, of course, its most obvious function, but the fire offered more than just warmth. It was also a source of light, a place to dry damp clothing, and a central point for all domestic activity, fostering a sense of communal warmth beyond mere temperature. Now consider the smoke. In modern homes, smoke is a nuisance, a sign of inefficiency, and something to be quickly expelled. In the medieval home, however, while certainly an irritant and a health hazard by today's standards, smoke played an unexpected role in the overall insulation and preservation of the structure. Most medieval homes, particularly earlier ones, lacked sophisticated chimneys. Instead, smoke would simply rise into the rafters, slowly finding its way out through a simple hole in the roof known as a louvre, or through gaps in the thatch. This seemingly crude system meant that the interior of the home was often filled with a hazy, smoky atmosphere. You would feel it in your eyes, perhaps, and taste it faintly on your tongue, a constant reminder of the warmth that permeated the very air you breathed, yet also a testament to the raw nature of medieval indoor living. This constant presence of smoke, however, had a curious sealing effect. As the warm, smoke-laden air circulated, it permeated the very fabric of the building, Minute cracks and fissures in the wattle and daub walls, the thatched roof, and even the timber framework became coated with a thin layer of soot and creosote, a tar-like substance produced by burning wood. Over time, this accumulation helped to fill the tiny gaps that would otherwise allow cold drafts to seep in. It wasn't a perfect seal by any means, but it added another subtle layer to the home's thermal resistance. The smoke essentially created an internal, semi-permeable membrane, trapping some of the heat within the living space and reducing air infiltration. You might not have seen it, but the very air you breathed was helping to solidify the home's defenses against the cold. Beyond its role as an accidental sealant, the smoke also acted as a powerful natural preservative. The creosote and other compounds present in the smoke are natural fungicides and insecticides. This meant that the timbers of the roof, the wooden framework of the walls, and the thatch itself were constantly being treated, making them far more resistant to rot, mildew, and insect infestations. Imagine the structural integrity of your home being slowly, constantly fortified by the very byproduct of your heating system. This was particularly crucial for timber-framed buildings and thatched roofs, which were highly susceptible to decay from dampness and biological attack. The smoke helped to dry out the materials and inhibit the growth of damaging organisms, extending the lifespan of the building and ensuring its continued ability to provide shelter. So, while you might have found yourself squinting through the haze or coughing from the acrid air, the smoke was silently working to maintain the structural health of your dwelling. It was a trade-off: comfort versus longevity, and a subtle, unacknowledged layer of insulation. The small openings in the roof, whether a simple hole or a rudimentary louvre, designed to allow some of the smoke to escape, were often deliberately modest in size. Their dimensions were a delicate compromise, large enough to prevent the buildup of dangerously thick, suffocating smoke that could render the dwelling uninhabitable, but crucially, small enough to retain a significant portion of the precious heat and to allow the smoke to linger and perform its preserving and sealing functions. This intricate balance, a profound understanding of cause and effect, was not derived from scientific calculation or theoretical knowledge, but was intuitive, born of generations of practical, lived experience and observation. The overarching goal was never perfect air quality, but the far more pressing concerns of adequate warmth and a home that would reliably stand for many years, providing continuous shelter against the relentless elements. The central hearth, therefore, was far more than just a source of warmth. It was a multifunctional element that integrated directly into the home's overall thermal strategy. It provided direct heat, helped to seal the building against drafts through the deposition of smoke, and preserved the very materials from which the home was constructed. It was a testament to the ingenious adaptation of available resources to meet fundamental human needs in a harsh environment. The warmth radiating from the fire, the subtle haze in the air, the faint, persistent scent of wood smoke, these were the sensory hallmarks of a medieval home, each contributing to the complex tapestry of its warmth and endurance. This central point of heat and light was the heart of the home, a constant comforting presence against the enduring cold of the world outside, preparing the way for even more intimate and direct forms of shared warmth. even with the central hearth crackling and casting its flickering glow, and despite the thick layers of mud, clay, and straw that formed the walls, the cold in a medieval home could be a relentless adversary. The open flame certainly provided a welcome warmth to those gathered close, but the heat quickly dissipated into the larger, often drafty spaces, especially in the colder months. The air beyond the immediate vicinity of the fire often remained crisp, sometimes even biting. This pervasive chill meant that medieval people had to employ every conceivable strategy to conserve warmth, turning to one of the most fundamental and readily available sources of heat, the living body itself. The concept of personal space, as we understand it today, was largely unknown to the common folk of the Middle Ages. Homes, particularly those of peasants and lower-income families, were often small single-room dwellings, or perhaps divided by simple, non-structural partitions. This compact design was not merely a matter of building simplicity or economic necessity. It was a deliberate and highly effective thermal strategy. Families lived in close proximity, and this shared living was a crucial element in their battle against the cold. At night, the strategy of communal warmth became even more pronounced. Families would often sleep together, huddled on large shared sleeping platforms or on straw-filled mattresses laid directly on the floor near the hearth. Children would nestle against their parents, siblings against each other, creating a living mass of warmth. Each body contributed its own heat, and collectively, this warmth was trapped by the shared blankets and animal hides that served as bedding, significantly raising the temperature within the immediate sleeping area. The simple act of breathing in a confined space also contributed to a slight rise in humidity and warmth. This closeness was not just about affection or companionship. It was a practical, essential method of survival during the long, dark, and frigid nights. The sounds of quiet breathing, the occasional shifting on a straw pallet, and the gentle warmth radiating from multiple bodies created a sense of security and a palpable barrier against the biting outdoor chill. Beyond human warmth, many medieval households extended this principle of shared living to include their most valuable possessions, their livestock. For many peasant families, their animals were their livelihood, their food source, and their primary form of wealth. Losing a cow, a pig, or a flock of chickens to the bitter cold of winter could spell ruin, leading to starvation and destitution. Therefore, bringing the animals indoors, especially during the harshest months, was a common and logical practice. This was not simply an act of protection for the animals, it was a strategic move to harness their considerable body heat. Imagine a rustic medieval home, the main living area, perhaps with a low, rough-hewn timber partition or a simple wattle and daub wall separating it from an adjoining section. In this section, or sometimes even in the same main room, you would find the family's animals. The gentle clucking of chickens, the soft grunts of pigs, the occasional lowing of a calf, or the rustle of straw as a goat shifted in its slumber would have been familiar sounds. These animals, particularly larger ones like cows or oxen, generated a remarkable amount of heat. A single cow, for instance, could produce as much warmth as several adult humans. This animal heat radiated into the living space, contributing significantly to the overall ambient temperature, making the home far more tolerable than it would have been otherwise. The design of some medieval homes, particularly the longhouse prevalent in certain parts of Europe, explicitly incorporated this shared human and animal living arrangement. In a longhouse, humans would occupy one end and livestock the other, often separated by a central passageway or a low wall, but always under the same continuous roof. This architectural solution was a direct and ingenious response to the need for mutual warmth and protection. The earthy smell of straw and animals, the gentle sounds of their presence, and the consistent warmth they provided were an intrinsic part of the medieval domestic environment. While modern sensibilities might recoil at the thought, for medieval people it was a vital, even comforting aspect of their daily existence, a testament to their resourcefulness. This practice also offered practical benefits beyond mere warmth. Keeping animals indoors provided greater security against theft and predation, and it made daily chores like milking, feeding, and collecting eggs much easier, especially during inclement weather. The manure produced by the animals could also be more readily collected and used as valuable fertilizer for the spring crops, creating a cyclical system of resource management. The animals were not just beasts of burden or sources of food, they were, in a very real sense, living, breathing radiators, essential components of the medieval home's heating system. The combined effect of human and animal body heat, contained within the insulated shell of the dwelling, created a microclimate that was significantly warmer than the harsh outdoor environment. This was a form of bioinsulation, relying on the natural warmth of living beings. It was a simple yet profoundly effective strategy born of necessity and deep understanding of the immediate environment. The physical layers of mud, wood, and thatch worked to keep the cold out, while the living, breathing inhabitants worked to generate and retain warmth within. This communal living, whether with family or with farm animals, paints a vivid picture of medieval life. It highlights a society where interdependence was not just a social ideal, but a daily and tangible reality, driven by the fundamental need for survival and warmth. The boundaries between human and animal life were often blurred by necessity, creating homes that were bustling, noisy, and alive with the constant presence of their inhabitants. In a world where luxury was rare and comfort a fleeting concept, the simple, shared warmth of bodies, human and animal alike, was a precious commodity, a constant reminder of the ingenuity and resilience of people in the face of relentless natural forces. This intimate cohabitation ensured that even on the bitterest winter nights, a vital, life-sustaining warmth permeated the medieval home, a warmth that was not generated by complex machinery, but by the very essence of life itself, huddled together against the cold. We have traveled through the ingenious methods by which people in the Middle Ages sought to insulate their homes, creating shelters that, though simple by our standards, were marvels of practical design. You have learned how every available resource, from the earth beneath their feet to the fur on an animal's back, was pressed into service to hold back the relentless cold. It was not a single grand solution, but rather a complex, deeply intuitive layering of defenses, a testament to human resourcefulness in the face of nature's formidable power. Imagine the very foundation of these homes, the thick, robust walls of mud, clay, and wattle and daub. These were not merely structural elements. They were the initial powerful barrier against the biting winds and the creeping damp. They created a dense thermal mass, slowly absorbing the day's warmth and then gently releasing it into the interior during the colder hours. This fundamental use of the earth itself provided a heavy, quiet solidity, a first line of defense that grounded the dwelling and gave it a comforting sense of permanence. The act of applying these layers, often by hand, created a seamless, draft-resistant envelope that began the vital work of keeping the cold at bay. Then, upon this earthy foundation, came the pervasive integration of nature's abundant fibers. You heard how straw, reeds, and rushes were not confined to the roof alone, though their thick, tightly bound layers certainly made for an excellent breathable thatch, shedding rain and trapping air. These materials were also packed into spaces between wattle frames, providing crucial infill that added another layer of insulation within the walls. Beyond structural uses, these fibers were scattered across floors, forming soft, yielding surfaces that not only provided a measure of comfort, but, more importantly, created a deep, insulating layer that prevented the cold earth from chilling the living space. The rustle of dry straw underfoot, the faint, earthy scent of the reeds, these were the quiet sounds and smells of a home actively working to retain its warmth. Animals, too, offered their vital contribution to this ancient art of keeping warm. The fur, wool, and hides of sheep, cattle, and other beasts were not merely sources of food or clothing, they were integral to the home's thermal strategy. You learned how these materials, rich with natural air pockets, were hung on walls, draped over doorways, and spread across floors as rugs. They created an immediate, palpable warmth, a soft, yielding barrier that trapped pockets of air close to the body and within the room. The thick, shaggy texture of a fur pelt against a cold stone wall or the deep pile of a woven wool blanket represented comfort and a crucial element in the intricate system of medieval insulation. This was a direct, tactile connection to the animal world, turning its bounty into essential protection against the chill. The internal architecture of warmth was further enhanced by the strategic use of woven fabrics. Heavy tapestries and large fabric hangings, often richly decorated, were not solely for aesthetic appeal or storytelling. Their primary, practical purpose was to create smaller, more manageable pockets of heated air within the larger, often open-plan rooms of a medieval dwelling. By partitioning off areas around the hearth or creating alcoves for sleeping, these hangings allowed the precious heat generated by the fire to concentrate, making a small section of a vast hall genuinely warm. The gentle sway of the heavy cloth, the way it absorbed sound and created a sense of enclosed intimacy, all contributed to a feeling of snugness and protection from the colder outer reaches of the room. And then there was the floor, a zone often overlooked in modern homes, but critical in medieval times. You explored how the ground itself, a vast source of cold, was meticulously layered to prevent its chill from rising. Fresh rushes, often mixed with aromatic herbs, were laid down, then regularly replenished, creating a soft, thick mat. Beneath these, or sometimes woven into them, could be layers of straw or even discarded cloth, all working together to create a deep, insulating barrier. This was not just about keeping feet warm, it was about preventing the entire lower half of the living space from becoming a reservoir of cold. The springy give of the rushes, the subtle fragrance of the herbs, these details spoke of a continuous, diligent effort to make the home not just habitable, but truly comfortable. Even the points of entry and exit, the windows and doors which lacked the glass we take for granted, were addressed with ingenious simplicity. You discovered how robust wooden shutters, tightly closed at night or during harsh weather, provided a solid, unyielding barrier. Where some light was desired, parchment, thin sheets of horn, or even animal bladders, often oiled for translucency, were stretched across openings. These allowed a dim, diffused light to enter, while still effectively blocking drafts. Heavy woolen cloths or thick animal hides were frequently hung over doorways, creating a double barrier against the ingress of cold air. Every gap, every seam, was a potential breach in the thermal defenses, and medieval dwellers were acutely aware of this, sealing their homes with a methodical precision born of necessity. The central hearth, the beating heart of the medieval home, played its part not only as a source of direct heat, but also in the broader insulation strategy. While the open flames radiated warmth, and the smoke, though a challenge, eventually found its way out through a simple hole in the roof or a rudimentary chimney, the very act of burning wood had other effects. The dry heat helped to reduce dampness within the home, a significant contributor to cold. Furthermore, the constant presence of smoke, even in its dispersal, helped to deposit a layer of soot on the internal surfaces of the walls and ceiling. This layer, over time, would have subtly contributed to sealing minute cracks and pores in the building materials, enhancing the overall airtightness of the structure. The flickering light and the crackling sounds of the fire were a constant comforting presence, a focal point around which warmth gathered. Finally, you heard how the very nature of medieval communal living became an integral part of the insulation strategy. The practice of sharing living spaces, often with extended family and sometimes even with livestock, in adjacent areas or on the ground floor, was not merely a matter of convenience or social custom. It was a deeply practical method of leveraging collective body heat. Each person, each animal, contributed a small but significant amount of warmth to the enclosed space. This communal warmth, combined with the dense packing of people into smaller, more heavily insulated areas during the coldest months, created a powerful, living source of heat. The soft murmur of voices, the quiet breathing of sleeping bodies, these were the subtle, organic elements that made a medieval home a truly warm place, not just through passive insulation, but through active, living warmth. So, as we bring our journey to a close, consider this intricate tapestry of ingenuity, woven by our medieval ancestors. Their methods were not complex, but they were profoundly effective, born of a deep understanding of their environment and an innate human drive for comfort and survival. From the earth itself, shaped into walls, to the fibers of plants and the warmth of animals, to the careful layering of fabrics and the sealing of every opening, their homes were a continuous, active dialogue with the elements. They remind us that warmth throughout history has been a precious commodity, not simply a given, but something to be diligently pursued and carefully preserved. Their resilience, their practical wisdom, and their constant resourceful struggle against the cold continue to echo through time, a quiet testament to their ability to create havens of warmth in a world that often offered little in the way of easy comfort. And perhaps, as you reflect on their ingenious solutions, you might find your own space feeling a little warmer, a little more secure, as you drift into a peaceful and restorative rest.